lạc tại thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, Trung tâm Kinh tế Tài chính Khoa học, Giáo dục. Tọa lạc tại thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, Trung tâm Kinh tế Tài chính Khoa học, Giáo dục của cả nước, Trường Đại học Ngân hàng Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, trường đại học công lập trực thuộc Ngân hàng Nhà nước Việt Nam với lịch sử gần một nửa thế kỷ, là một trong những cái nôi đào tạo và cung cấp nguồn nhân lực chủ yếu cho hệ thống tài chính ngân hàng nói riêng và toàn bộ nền kinh tế nói chung. Được thành lập năm 1976 với mục tiêu ban đầu là đào tạo đội ngũ cán bộ cho ngành ngân hàng phía Nam, trường đã phát triển trở thành một trong những trường đại học đa ngành hàng đầu về đào tạo, nghiên cứu khoa học và chuyển giao công nghệ trong lĩnh vực kinh tế, tài chính, ngân hàng, kinh doanh, quản lý, luật, ngôn ngữ, công nghệ v.v. với các bậc đào tạo từ cử nhân đến thạc sĩ, tiến sĩ. Đứng trước yêu cầu của nền kinh tế và hệ thống tài chính ngân hàng theo định hướng chuyển đổi số và xu hướng hội nhập quốc tế của hệ thống giáo dục đại học, trường Đại học Ngân hàng Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh đã có những bước đi tiên phong và vững chắc. Phát triển các chuyên ngành đào tạo mới và đổi mới các chương trình đào tạo hiện tại theo định hướng chuyển đổi số, chuẩn bị cho sinh viên, học viên các kiến thức, kỹ năng, phương pháp tư duy nhằm thích ứng với môi trường kinh doanh, làm việc trong kỷ nguyên số. Phát triển đội ngũ giảng viên có trình độ cao thông qua đào tạo dài hạn ở nước ngoài, tuyển dụng và hợp tác với đội ngũ giảng viên vừa có trình độ học thuật, vừa có kinh nghiệm điều hành quản lý phong phú từ các doanh nghiệp, tổ chức tài chính, tăng cường hợp tác quốc tế trong xây dựng và phát triển các chương trình đào tạo, tổ chức đánh giá kiểm định quốc tế cấp chương trình đào tạo và cấp cơ sở giáo dục, đẩy mạnh nghiên cứu khoa học theo chuẩn quốc tế, gia tăng chất lượng và số lượng công bố quốc tế. Năm 2019, trường Đại học Ngân hàng Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh đã được cấp giấy chứng nhận kiểm định chất lượng theo bộ tiêu chuẩn của Hiệp hội các trường đại học Đông Nam Á ECONVN2022 đối với 2 chương trình đào tạo cử nhân chuyên ngành tài chính và chuyên ngành ngân hàng. Theo hệ thống dữ liệu SPAO, trường cũng là một trong 2 trường thuộc khối ngành kinh tế nằm trong top 50 cơ sở giáo dục đại học có công bố quốc tế tốt nhất Việt Nam năm 2019. BUH cũng đã có 20 năm kinh nghiệm đào tạo sau đại học ở bậc thạc sĩ và tiến sĩ. Các học viên cao học, nghiên cứu sinh tốt nghiệp từ BUH đã trở thành các chuyên gia, nhà quản lý, nhà khoa học, nắm giữ các vị trí chủ chốt tại các cơ quan quản lý, tổ chức tài chính, doanh nghiệp, trường đại học, viện nghiên cứu. Hiện tại, trường đang đào tạo trình độ thạc sĩ với 3 chuyên ngành: thạc sĩ tài chính ngân hàng, thạc sĩ quản trị kinh doanh, thạc sĩ luật kinh tế. Các chương trình đào tạo thạc sĩ tại BUH được thiết kế giúp người học sau khi tốt nghiệp sẽ có kiến thức chuyên môn cập nhật và nâng cao, tư duy hệ thống và khả năng nghiên cứu độc lập, phương pháp giảng dạy thông qua tình huống và dự án, giúp học viên phát triển khả năng phát hiện và giải quyết vấn đề thông qua việc tiếp cận, phân tích, giải quyết các tình huống thực tế. Từ đó hoàn thiện năng lực chuyên môn và quản lý, phát triển tư duy chiến lược, nâng cao năng lực cạnh tranh trong bối cảnh chuyển đổi số. Đội ngũ giảng viên hướng dẫn khoa học là các chuyên gia, nhà khoa học đầu ngành, bao gồm kết hợp giữa kinh nghiệm giảng dạy, nghiên cứu, tư vấn chính sách, tư vấn doanh nghiệp và kinh nghiệm quản trị, điều hành phong phú. Học viên chương trình thạc sĩ cũng có cơ hội tham gia các chương trình chuyển đổi tín chỉ để nhận bằng thạc sĩ quốc tế của các trường đại học uy tín là đối tác của BUH như Đại học Boston, UK, Đại học Griffith, Australia. Với truyền thống và bề dày kinh nghiệm trong đào tạo sau đại học, cùng với việc tiên phong đổi mới bắt kịp các xu hướng giáo dục mới, trường Đại học Ngân hàng Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh sẵn sàng đồng hành cùng với hệ thống tài chính ngân hàng, các doanh nghiệp, tổ chức trong công tác đào tạo và phát triển nguồn nhân lực chất lượng cao.
Founded in 2006, the University of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, BVU, is a multidisciplinary university in the beautiful coastal city of Vũng Tàu, a leading center of tourism, the oil and gas industry, and maritime economy in Vietnam. With the vision of becoming a large university with diverse training disciplines, high reputation in the country and internationally, and a sustainable community on the 4 bases: diversification, internationalization, business engagement, and a variety of experiences. BVU focuses on providing exceptional facilities for teaching, learning, and scientific research activities of our faculties and students. The university has 5 faculties including tourism, nursing, languages, cultures, arts, maritime, economics and technology, information technology, electrical and electronic engineering, and business management. The training programs have been innovated towards reducing theories and increasing practices based on local enterprises' demands. BVU students also practice, do internships, and gain practical work experience with the university's business partners. In scientific research, BVU lecturers and students also achieve many excellent results. In addition to many top awards in innovation, starter projects, and provincial scientific research, BVU students have also won national awards. The university has made 3 technology transfer agreements with enterprises in chemistry and food technology, social sciences, and mechatronics. BVU students also demonstrate many talents by organizing many meaningful community activities, such as the Mid-Autumn Festival for kids, Loving Pair of Leaves, and the National Cross Country Run and Marathon Tournament in 2019. The university has signed cooperation agreements with 51 partners, including 27 prestigious universities and research institutes in the world, as well as 24 governmental, non-governmental organizations and enterprises in 16 countries in Asia, Europe, and America. In addition, BVU students can also study with the guidance of international experts and lecturers sent from governmental organizations such as JICA, KHAI, Japan Foundation, and Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Ho Chi Minh City. They also have the opportunity to receive encouragement scholarships from international organizations and corporations. In 2019, Baria Vung Tau University was accredited by the Ministry of Education and Training. The number of graduates having a job within 1 year of graduation has reached 95%. Aiming to become a highly ranked university, along with improving the quality of training programs, BVU is going to open a new campus with an area of nearly 10 hectares, attracting nearly 30,000 domestic and international students. According to these strategic steps, BVU has become a prestigious training, research and technology transfer institution and has supported to become a human resource training center for Baria Vung Tau, the southeast provinces, and the whole country. Baria Vung Tau University, experience to succeed.
KHAI conference is about to start in a few minutes, so please make sure that all your Wi-Fi connections, electric devices related, is on the ready mode. Thank you for your attention and listening. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the 5th International Econometric Conference, Econ 2022, start right now. And with the main objectives of this conference,
That's difficult to say. It was given me the day I was born. Want to know about the stories of the empire of Rome? My eyes are not of me, I would dare to say. All I know of you is on the size of Rome. A film by Coppola to helicopters roll. One day I'll touch your soul. One day I'll finally know your soul. One day I'll come to you to say hello, Vietnam. Tell me all about my collar, my hand, and my little feet that have carried me every mile of the way. Want to see how your strength show me all I do not know. Wood and cement, floating market, light of gold. All I know of you is on the size of Rome. A film by Coppola to helicopters roll. One day I'll walk your soul. One day I'll finally know your soul. One day I'll come to you to say hello, Vietnam. And Buddha made of stone watch over me. My dreams, they lead me through the fires of birth. In prayer, in the light, I see my king. I touch my tree, my rose, my begin. One day I'll walk your song. One day I'll finally know your soul. One day I'll come to you to say hello, Vietnam. One day I'll walk your song. One day I'll finally know your soul. One day I'll come to you to say hello, Vietnam. To say hello, Vietnam. To say xin chào, Vietnam. trắng nhung đồi, nông xanh lúa dọc dần biển cả tiếng ơi ru con ngủ ru hời, đồi xanh lúa thẳng cánh bay cò bay, đưa nước về vùng quê sang rồi. Việt Nam yêu dấu xanh xanh lấy tre, suối đổ về sông qua những nương tre, dòng sông cuốn dồn về biển cả, lứa thanh niên vui thỏa cuộc đời.
Mùa xuân tới, nguồn sống đang sục sôi, đất nước tôi Việt Nam sáng ngời.
Mùa xuân tới, nguồn sống đang sục sôi, đất nước tôi Việt Nam sáng ngời.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have watched those videos were made by the student of Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City. It is a strong message we would like to send to all international guests that Vietnam is always beautiful as usual, and no matter what happens, we always stay strong and positive, especially COVID-19. And right now, the 5th International Econometric Conference is start. And with the main objectives of this conference is to overview latest ideas and developments in financial econometrics, with an emphasis on how to best use prior knowledge, for example, Bayesian way, and how to best use successful data processing techniques from other application areas, for example, quantum physics. The conference also covers applications to economy-related phenomena ranging from traditionally analyzed phenomena such as manufacturing, food industry, and taxes, to newer to analyze phenomena such as cryptocurrencies, influencer marketing, COVID-19 pandemic, financial fraud detection, corruption, and shadow economy. This conference will inspire practitioners to learn how to apply state-of-the-art Bayesian, quantum, and related techniques to economic and financial problems, and inspire researchers to further improve the existing techniques and come up with the new techniques for studying economic and financial phenomena. The conference will also be of interest to students interested in latest ideas and results. And this is also the reason why Banking University Ho Chi Minh City and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu University co-organized ECONVN2022 with the topic Financial Econometrics, Bayesian Analysis, Quantum Uncertainty, and Related Topics. And as you know, in the light of recent COVID-19 outbreak, this ECONVN 2022 conference is still organized under Zoom meeting platform by the dedicated organization from Ho Chi Minh City, from Banking Ho Chi Minh City University. In particular, this year, keynote speakers will attend the ECONVN 2022 conference by Zoom system because of influence by the outbreak. Banking University Ho Chi Minh City is very grateful for the contribution of invited speakers as follows. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Hung Trung Nguyen, Scientific Committee Chair of ECONVN Conference, New Mexico State University. Professor Vladimir Kranovic, Editor-in-Chief of the ECONVN Proceedings, Universities of Texas at El Paso, USA. Professor Daniel Stefan Hagen, Aalborg University Business School, Denmark. Professor John Harding, New Mexico State University, USA. Professor Kazuhiro Sugita, University of Ryukyu, Japan. Professor Mark Edwin Schaffer, Heriot-Watt University, UK. Professor Polina Krenikova, University of Lancaster, UK. Professor Pam Komam, King Mongkut University of Technology, Thonburi, Thailand. Professor Thomas Augustin, Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, Germany. Professor Tong Hui Wang, New Mexico State University, USA. And I also would like to introduce to you Professor Vyacheslav Yukhalov, John Institute of Nuclear Research, Russia. Professor William Briggs, Well Medical College of Cornell University, USA. And also would like to introduce to you Professor Workafon Yamaka, Chiang Mai University, Thailand. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, in the auditorium at the moment, we are proud to welcome the representative of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu University, the sponsor of the ECONVN 2022 conference. Please welcome Associate Professor Phạm Đình Long, Vice Rector of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu University, Administrative Committee, Co-Chair of the ECONVN 2022. And I would like to introduce to you Dr. Phạm Ngọc Khanh, Dean of Faculty of Economics, Law, Logistics of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu University. From the side of other universities and organizations, please give a big applause for Dr. Phạm Minh Tú, Vice Director of Banking Strategy Institute, the State Bank of Vietnam. We would like to introduce to you Dr. Trần Nam Quốc, Head of Business Department, University of Management and Technology, Ho Chi Minh City. We would like to introduce to you Doctor of Science Trần Trọng Khuê, Văn Lang University. And now, at last but not least, please welcome members of Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City as follows. Associate Professor Đoàn Thanh Hà, Chairman of the University Council of Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City, Administrative Committee, Co-Chair of the ECONVN2022. We also would like to introduce to you the Associate Professor Nguyễn Đức Trung, Rector in charge of Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City, Administrative Committee, Vice Chair of the ECONVN 2022 Conference. And also, we have the presence of Dr. Nguyễn Trần Phúc, Vice Rector of Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City, Administrative Committee, Vice Chair of the ECONVN 2022. The next is the presence of Associate Professor Phạm Thị Thúy Diễm, Vice Rector of Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City. And also we have the presence of Associate Professor Nguyễn Ngọc Thạch, Editor-in-Chief of the Asian Journal of Economics and Banking, Organizing Committee Chair of the ECONVN 2022. And the most important is another big hand for the presence of all chiefs for all departments, lecturers, students from Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City, as well as presenters and participants attending here today. Ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate your presence, for your taking time out, your busy schedules to join us here today. And also, we all know that due to negative effect of COVID-19, we hope you will find the program we have lined up for you be fruitful and engaging. And right now, to kick off this morning's program, I'm pleased to invite Associate Professor Nguyễn Đức Trung, Rector in charge of Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City, to deliver the speech. Thank you. Please welcome.
The Professor Hưng Nguyễn, the Chairman of Econ Scientific Committee, Professor Vladimir Kinovich, Editor-in-Chief of Econ Proceedings, and our representative invited speaker from fellow countries, the representatives of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu universities, representatives of sponsors from enterprise, banks, central and local news agency present today, the distinguished guests and local authorities of Ho Chi Minh City, the respected teachers and lecturers, and my dear children. On the behalf of rectors of Ho Chi Minh University of Banking, I would like to extend the warmest welcome and my genuine gratitude toward leaders of institutions, professors, lecturers, distinguished guests, students from presenting here today. Ladies and gentlemen, global integration is the mainstream nowadays, and Ho Chi Minh University of Banking Hub is also a part of it. Over 40 years of establishment and development, Ho Chi Minh University of Banking become one of the leading institutions specialized in training scientific research and technology transfers in the field of economics, as well as banking and finance. Along with Vietnam development and today's main strengths, HOPS has set a goal in 2022 to become the multidisciplinary universities focusing on business and administration, creates a friendly education environment, develops comprehensive individuals, people of knowledge, ethics, skills, and novel ideas of life who contribute and serve his nation, his people, and build up a generation and global citizen. Besides the mission of change skillful workforce serving the economies, HAP never stop improving in research fields. More and more research papers from school lecturers are being published on prestigious scientific journals inside and across the borders. Such hard work in research activities has seen initial accomplishment, as we still wish to prove our position in the academic environment. Hence, HAP and Barrier Vũng universities stand side by side to host the 5th International Econometrics Conference of Vietnam, ECON 2022, on financial econometrics, Bayesian analysis, quantum uncertainty, and related topics. Ladies and gentlemen, as the main objectives of this conference mentioned above, the focus of research on financial econometrics, Bayesian analysis, quantum uncertainties, and related topics is receiving much attention from scientists, practitioners, and policy makers. That's the reason for our conference, ECON 2022 today. Thank you, Professor Hưng Nguyễn, Professor Vladimir Granovic, for your great contributions to the development of ECON conference and Asian Journal of Economics and Banking, as well as the contributions of our invited speakers from fellow countries. As the most important list, dearly researchers, please receive my deepest gratitude for our excellent work to present at this conference. Thank you, distinguished guests and representatives from banks, enterprises, and new agencies for your attendance. Ladies and gentlemen, on the behalf of organizer, I announce the 5th International Econometrics Conference of Vietnam, ECON 2022, on financial econometrics, Bayesian analysis, quantum uncertainties, and related topics, hopefully start now. I wish you with good health, peace, and great success. Wishing your conference a great success. Thank you very much.
As you can heard about all the message of the Banking University of Ho Chi Minh City would like to send to all of you. We always stay strong and believe to the brighter future. And now, to continue our conference, I would like to invite Professor Hưng Trung Nguyen, Scientific Committee Chair of the ECONVN2022, deliver his speech. Please welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I am Hưng Nguyen. On behalf of the Scientific Committee of ECON VN 2022, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this conference and Happy New Year. Although due to the actual pandemic, some of us, including all foreign invited speakers, cannot participate in person, we have worked so hard and actually joined the conference on video to ensure that this conference will be as successful as previous one. As usual, an international conference such as this aims mainly at providing a forum for scientific presentations and exchanges of research progress and ideas which should contribute to advancing economic theory for applications. At the technical level, we are very pleased to receive significant contributions to the conference as testified by the conference proceeding, which will be published and distributed worldwide by Springboard Velvet. I would first like to thank all the hosts of this conference. I would like to thank the organization committee, especially Professor Nguyễn Ngọc Thạch for organizing this committee, and Professor Vladimir Granovic for working so hard, 25 hours a day, to make the upcoming Springboard Velvet possible. While we are working forward to much more successful ECON conferences in years ahead, For now, let's enjoy the conference and have a fruitful interactions with participants of the conference, even on Zoom. Thank you and Happy New Year again.
Thank you, Professor Hung Trung Nguyen, for those meaningful words. And now, to continue our conference, I would like to invite Associate Professor Phạm Thị Long, Vice Rector of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu University, towards to the stage to deliver his speech. Please welcome.
Dear Associate Professor Nguyễn Đức Trung, Vice Rector in charge of Peking University, Ho Chi Minh City. Associate Professor Nguyễn Ngọc Thạch, Editor-in-Chief of the Asian Journal of Economics and Banking. Professor Vladik Kranovic and Professor Hưng Nguyễn, ECONVN distinguished guests and researchers. Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu University appreciate the opportunity to co-organize with the Banking University of Ho Chi Minh City for the 5th International Econometric Conference of Vietnam, ECONVN 2022, at Ho Chi Minh City. With the participation of leading scientists in the fields of finance and banking, researchers from university and research institutes from Vietnam and other countries, the conference creates a space for exchanging ideas, update and share research results, and experience in solving practical issues related to financial econometrics in Vietnam and around the world. With the topic, financial econometrics, Bayesian analysis, quantum uncertainty, and related topics, researcher has the unique opportunity to assess new methods on financial econometrics, as well as publish their research on Springer theory. So one more thank you, everyone, and again, wish you a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Phạm Thị Long. And Professor Phạm Thị Long, please, can you remain in here on the stage? And we would like to send you a appreciation flowers to appreciate your presence here today. And also, I would like to invite Professor Nguyễn Đức Trung to the stage. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big applause to memorize this moment in cooperation between two universities. Thank you, Professor Nguyễn Đức Trung. Thank you, Professor Phạm Thị Long. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a good time and good start for all of us. And in order to memorize this moment, not only two professors, but I would like to invite all of you come here and take a photo in order to remember this moment. Please welcome all of you come here, talk to the stage and take pictures, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 5th Econometric Conference 2022. Thank you everyone. Thank you, professors. And now you can back to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joe, and on behalf of Banking University, Ho Chi Minh City, we would like you to have a beautiful morning, and also for those guests all around the world, you will also have a beautiful day. And right now, please allow me to introduce to you three our guest speakers in this morning. Professor Katsuhiro Sugita, Professor William Briggs, Professor Mark Edwin Schaffer. And to continue the event, I would like to invite Professor Vladimir Kranovic for hosting the visual conference and holding the chair for this morning section. Please. As you can see, because this is a connection and conference all around the world, that's the reason why we also will have some challenges.
Vladimir, open your audio. Your audio is closed. Vladimir, your audio is closed.
For those speakers who are online, please open your microphone.
Vladimir?
Yeah,
Okay.
the host is not allowing.
No, it's allowing now.
Oh yeah, okay. So now it's allowing. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for the problem. So thank you for the introduction and thank you for the wonderful concert and performances. And we wish next year we will be in person. So it's my pleasure and honor to chair this session. The first talk will be given by Professor Katsuhiro Sugita, time series forecasting using a Markov switching vector autoregressive model with stochastic search variable selection method. So, Dr. Sugita, please, you have 40 minutes for the talk, and maybe let's keep 5 minutes for questions and discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to start now.
Yes, please.
Okay, just a moment. Hello. So now I'm going to share the slide. And just a moment.
Yeah, we can see your slides. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Just a moment. So, hello, everyone. My name is Katsuhiro Sugita from University of Ryukyu, Okinawa, Japan. I'm very happy to be able to talk to you today. And I'd like to thank organizers for inviting me to speak today. Because I'm not good at English, I'm sorry if it is hard to hear. Today, I'd like to talk about time series forecasting of Markov switching vector autoregressive model, Bayesian stochastic search variable selection model. So, okay. And here is the outline of my presentation. My presentation consists of 5 parts. First, I'd like to start by talking about introduction briefly. Second, I'm going to talk about vector autoregressive or VAR model with stochastic search variable selection or SSVS method. Third, I'm going to talk about Markov vector autoregressive or MS-VAR model with SSVS prior. Fourth, I'll show you an empirical example using MS-VAR model with SSVS method, both in sample and out of sample inside. And then I will.
Can I interrupt for a second? I think we should. There is a background noise. I think we should ask everybody to mute the microphones.
Okay, just a
except
moment.
for the speaker.
Just a moment.
Sorry.
Okay. How about this? Okay, can you hear?
Go ahead. Yeah. No, there is a background noise, not from you, from somebody else, I think. I think we should ask. Can you mute
It's
that?
feedback, Vladek. They got to turn the main microphone off in the conference. It's feedback.
Yeah, I think the main microphone in the conference room. Can we switch it off? Can we mute it?
So, is it okay?
Yeah. Now it's good. Yeah.
No, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so so do I have? Is it better to start again or continue? Or yeah. Anyway, I continue. Okay, so I'm gonna I will illustrate the Monte Carlo simulation, and then finally I conclude. Okay. Is it clear, my voice? Nice. Now, my voice is clear.
Now it's very clear. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. Now I'm going to start introduction. As you know, vector autoregression models are very popular to analyze or forecast macroeconomics. Since Christopher Sims introduced VAR model in 1980, the model has been widely used among economists. However, VAR models tend to contain very large number of parameters. For example, VAR models with n variable and p log, we have n plus p times n square parameters. Okay. Nonlinear regime setting VAR model, such as Markov setting VAR or MS VAR model, has been also popular. MS VAR model is a nonlinear VAR model with state-dependent Markov setting, and it allows the regime shift in any parameter in the model to capture nonlinearities and asymmetry. There are many research papers using this MS VAR model, such as Qúy in 1997 and so on. Okay. According to the previous research, such as Engel in 1994 and others, Markov setting model fit in sample but focus poorly compared with linear models. Okay. There are several reasons why the Markov setting model is not good in forecasting. One of the reasons is that MS VAR model has overparameterization problem containing much more parameters than linear VAR models. For example, MS VAR model has R times n plus p times n square parameters, where this R is the number of regimes. So if we consider two regime MS VAR model, the number of parameters is twice as much as linear VAR model. To overcome the overparameterization problem of VAR models, in 1993, George and Makarov proposed Bayesian stochastic search variable selection, or SSVS method. In this paper, I implement the SSVS method to Markov setting VAR model to see whether SSVS helps to improve forecasting performance. Okay. So my paper considers MS VAR model with SSVS method, and I evaluate forecasting performance using US macroeconomic data, and then I evaluate forecasting performance using Monte Carlo simulation. Oh, what that? Okay. Now I will show you what the SSVS method is briefly. First, let's consider a VAR model with n variables as shown in this slide. Here, this small p is the number of logs, and the mu is constant term, and phi I is a coefficient matrix, and epsilon is the error term, which is IID normal distribution with covariance variance matrix sigma. Next, we rewrite the bar as matrix format as y equals x times phi plus epsilon. Here, y is a matrix consisting from y1 to yt, and x is defined like this, okay? And phi is a set of coefficient matrix. And then, okay, The SSVS considers prior on each element of phi with restriction, which is a hierarchical prior with mixture of two normal distributions. Okay, there are two, one is here and the second normal here. Conditional on unknown dummy variable, gamma j, okay? That takes 0 or 1, okay? So in this prior, tau 0 square, which is the variance of the first normal distribution, is small enough to be 0 and enough to be near 0, yeah. And tau 1 square, which is the variance of the second normal distribution, is large enough to be non-informative. This implies that if gamma j equals 0, then the element phi j is virtually 0, while if gamma j equals 1, then the element phi j is unrestricted, meaning the prior is relatively non-informative. Regarding prior on gamma j, we assume independent Bernoulli random variables. Here, small p, j, is a prior hyperparameter that is said to be 0.5 for no natural default choice. Okay. The SSVS also considers the restrictions on the covariance in sigma in bar. The error covariance matrix can be decomposed as inverse of sigma equals psi times transpose of psi, where psi is the upper triangular of the Kreisky decomposition of inverse of sigma. And the prior for the diagonal element of psi is assumed as gamma distribution. For the elements above the diagonal, the hierarchical prior that takes the mixture of two normal distributions conditional on unknown dummy variable omega ij that takes 0 or 1. In this prior, kappa 0 square, which is a variance of the first normal distribution, is small enough to be near 0, and kappa 1 square, which is a variance of the second normal distribution, is large enough to be non-informative. Regarding prior omega ij, independent Bernoulli is considered. Here, this qij is a prior hyperparameter that is said to be 0.5 for natural default choice. With these SSVS priors and likelihood function, we can derive the conditional posteriors. So let's move on to the next slide, and I will show the conditional posteriors. Okay. Here, posterior for the bar coefficient phi, conditional on gamma, eta, and psi, is given as normal distributions with mean, mu, and covariance psi. The conditional posterior of gamma is Bernoulli distribution, and like this. And the conditional posterior of the diagonal elements of psi is gamma distribution. Okay, and then conditional posterior of the above the diagonal element is the normal distribution. Okay. Finally, the conditional posterior of omega is Bernoulli. Okay. Now let's move on to the next section, and I will talk about Markov switching bar model with SSVS prior. Markov switching bar model allows regime shift in parameters. In MS bar, all parameters in mu, phi I, and the epsilon are the function of ST, which is an observable discrete state variable. Variance covariance matrix sigma is also allowed to change with regime. Okay, and this state variable ST evolves according to R state first order Markov switching process with the transition probabilities. Okay, this is transition probabilities. Okay. This MS var can be written in matrix form, and here Y is a matrix consisting from Y1 to YT. Matrix XT, X is defined here, where eta in X is an indicator variable that equals to 1 if regime ST is I and 0 otherwise. Phi ST is a matrix consisting of constant term and coefficient matrices, and E is a set of error. In Markov switch model, the regime is generated by process of an ergodic Markov chain with finite number of states ST, that is from 1 to R, defined by the transition probability matrix P. Okay. Just a moment. Okay. And to draw the regime variable ST, I used multi-move Gibbs sampler proposed by Carter and Combe in 1994 and Shepard in 1994. To generate the transition probabilities, I used Albert-Chib method. After generating the regime variables, we draw parameters of the bar in each regime using the SSVS method. Next, I will show you an empirical example of MS bar with SSVS method using US macroeconomic variables. So let's move on to the next slide. In this section, I present empirical results using US macroeconomic variables that include 3 variables. I obtained the data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. I used the unemployment rate, interest rate, and inflation rate. The unemployment rate is measured by the civilian unemployment rate. The interest rate is 3 months Treasury bill rate. Then inflation rate is obtained as 400 times the difference of the log of CPI, which is GDP chain type price index. These data are quarterly from 1953 quarter 1 to 2020 quarter 1 with sample size 268. Okay. Here I plotted this data. From this plot, we see from late 70 to 80, both inflation and interest rate are very high and volatile. This is because the Federal Reserve changed operating procedure to a non-borrowed reserve instrument. Also, in 2008, we see high unemployment rate and low interest and inflation rate caused by Lehman crash. Okay. Using this data, first I'm going to talk about in-sample results. I focus on 2 models, unrestricted MS bar models and restricted MS bar model with SSVS prior. Here, SMS bar is stands for MS bar model with SSVS method. For both models, I set the number of regime to be 2. I also consider the case of the 3 regime MS bar model, and I found that most evidence in favor of 2 regime models. About the number of lags for both models, I set 4. Even though the true lag length is less than 4, the SSVS can find 0 restrictions on the parameter of longer lags. And I ran the MCMC with 20,000 draws and 5,000 burn-in. In the next few slides, I will show you the in-sample results. Okay. This table shows in-sample estimation results for the unemployment rate of regime 1. Okay. The second column, this one, okay, is the posterior mean values and the standard deviation of the coefficients for the unrestricted MS bar model. Okay. The third column shows those values for the MS bar with SSVS. Okay. The fourth column shows the posterior probabilities of inclusion of in each parameter, which is the posterior probability that gamma j equals 1 for the bar coefficients. Okay. So in this discussion, I will refer to a parameter as being included if its posterior inclusion probability is greater than 0.5. As you see, for the MS bar with that SSVS, I mean here, the 7 out of 12 coefficients are significant, and while MS bar with SSVS includes only 4 coefficients. if we compare MS bar and SMS bar, SMS bar model generally estimate much smaller values in absolute values for the parameter of lower probability of inclusion. For example, this value is minus 0.052 for the unrestricted MS bar model, while it is just 0.002 for SMS bar model, which is small and near to 0. Okay. The next slide shows the in-sample results for the unemployment rate of regime 2. In regime 2, we can see the more variables are not included in both models. For both regimes, SSVS includes only its own lags, you can see. This slide shows the posterior results for the interest rate of regime 1. SMS bar model includes 6 coefficients, but for the regime 2, we see the SMS bar includes only 2 coefficients of its own lags. Okay. And this table shows that posterior for the inflation rate of regime 1. The inflation rate depends on not only its own lags, but also other variables in regime 1. For the regime 2, we find that less coefficients are included here. Okay. And this table shows the posterior psi of regime 1, which is upper triangular of Kreisky decomposition of inverse of sigma. The first three rows in the table show the diagonal elements of psi, and the last 3 rows show the above diagonal elements. And the smaller values mean larger error variance, okay, because this is inverse. So this table is for regime 2, and this one the posterior transition probabilities. Compared with the results of regime 1, we find that the variance of regime 2 is much smaller than those of regime 1. Okay. So MS bar includes 15 out of 36 possible bar coefficients for regime 1, while only 7 for regime 2, so that totally SSVS includes 22 out of 72 possible MS bar coefficients. This indicates that SSVS is effective for ensuring parsimony in over-parameterizing MS bar model. We found that regime 1 is high volatility and regime 2 is low volatility. Okay. SMS bar estimates much smaller values, almost near 0 in absolute values for the parameters with lower probability of inclusion. So SSVS contributes to shrinkage virtually to 0 for some coefficients with lower probability of inclusion. Okay. Sorry. And this figure presents a posterior expectation of the regime variables. The non-borrowed reserve operating procedure between 1979 and 1982 is detected as high volatility regime. This is probability of regime variable is 2. The regime variable 2 is a very regime variable 1 is high volatile, and the 2 is a low volatile. Okay. So in this term, from between 1979 to 82, the Federal Reserve moved from interest rate targeting to money growth targeting, and allowed to interest rate to fluctuate freely. Also, we can find our regime shift occurs around from 2006 to 2008. Okay. So now I present the out-of-sample iterated forecast. First, I talk about how the forecasting values are obtained. To compute forecasting values of Markov-City model, we need to compute the predicted regime probabilities. Okay, this is predicted regime probabilities as shown in this. This is transition probabilities, and second one is filtered regime probabilities. So from this, we can obtain the predicted regime probabilities. Okay. Then one step ahead forecast of the MS-bar model can be obtained by using this. This small m stands for MCMC replication. Okay. And this S hat is a vector of predicted regime probabilities. And the P hat is estimated transition probability matrix. And Z hat is a vector consists of predicted value for each regime. To make forecasting further than one period ahead, the iterated forecasts for the multi-period forecasts are obtained recursively. Okay. To evaluate the forecasting performance among several different models in a recursive out-of-sample prediction exercise, the mean squared forecast error, or MSFE, and the mean absolute forecasting error, or MAFE, are widely used. So I compute both the MSFE and the MAFE to compare forecasting performance. The empirical forecast comparison is based on recursive rolling forecast. The recursive exercise involves using data up to time tau to forecast at time tau plus h plus 1 for h equals 0 to 11, meaning 1 to 12 step ahead forecast. A sequence of 1 to 12 step ahead forecasts are generated at the starting date tau 0. Then the forecast origin is rolling forward one period, and another sequence of 1 to 12 step ahead forecast is generated. Then the procedure is repeated until tau equals t minus h. The result of the forecast performance depends on the choice of the starting date tau 0. So in this empirical exercise, I set the starting date tau 0 to be 180, so that the MSFE and MAFE statistics are computed over the forecast sample from 1998 quarter 1 to 2020 quarter 1. As before, the number of lags is set to be 4. And the MCMC is run with $20,000 after $5,000 per in. Okay. This table presents MSFE for unemployment rate with 4 forecast horizons, 1, 4, 8, and 12, using 4 models, VAR, MS bar, S bar, and SMS bar. This bar is unrestricted linear bar model. MS bar is unrestricted Markov stitching bar model, and S bar is linear bar model with SSVS prior, and the MS bar is a Markov stitching bar model with SSVS prior. So these two models, the bar and the MS bar, are unrestricted, while these two models, S bar and MS bar, are restricted with SSVS prior. For one step ahead, and for one step ahead and 8 step ahead forecast, the SMS bar produces the lowest MSFE, but for 4 step ahead forecast, the S bar is the best forecast performer, and for 12 step ahead forecast, unrestricted MS bar is the best. Okay, in this case, this table is for interest rate. For 1 and 4 step ahead forecast, SMS bar is the best, and for 8 and 12 step ahead forecast, linear S bar is the best in this case. Okay. This table is for inflation rate. SMS bar is the best only for 1 step ahead forecast, and the S bar is the best for 8 and 12 ahead forecast. Okay. So overall, the results are mixed, and the SMS bar does not always produce the lowest MSFE.
implementing SSVS prior on VAR or MS-VAR improve the forecasting performance. Okay, fine. Okay. Next, in this section, I show Monte Carlo simulation. The DGP is taken from the in-sample estimation by the SMS-VAR model to mimic the behavior of 3 variables of US macroeconomics. The simulation is conducted 100 times with t equal 268. And for each sample, I consider 4 models, VAR, MS-VAR, S-VAR, and SMS-VAR. And I computed average MSFEs and MAFE over 100 simulations. Okay. This table shows the results for the unemployment rate. As you see, SMS-VAR models produce the lowest MSFE for 3 forecast horizons. Okay, horizons. This table shows the results for the interest rate. For this variable, SMS-VAR produced the lowest MSFE for only 2 forecast horizons. Okay, and this table shows the results for the inflation rate. For this variable, SMS-VAR is the best forecasting performer for all forecasting horizons. Okay, so how much I have? Okay, is it enough? Okay. Overall, the SMS-VAR model performs better than all other models for the most of the case, and this means that adding the SSVS prior improves forecasting performance, and SSVS helps to alleviate the over-parameterization problem of VAR or MS-VAR models. However, the improvements are not modest, not so big. Okay. Finally, I conclude here. In this paper, I evaluate the forecasting performance of MS-VAR model with SSVS prior using US macroeconomic variables. MS-VAR or VAR models have the over-parameterization problem that causes to inaccuracy in out-of-sample forecasting. And implementing SSVS prior on VAR or MS-VAR models exclude these insignificant parameters. And in the recursive forecasting exercise, we found that SSVS improved forecasting performance, but not so. It's modest. Okay. So this is I finished my presentation now. Okay. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Sugita. So yes, now it's time. We have plenty of time for questions and discussion. Mm-hmm. So you can ask your question by putting them in the chat, or by unmuting yourself if you can unmute and asking the question. So any questions? Well, while people are typing, I have a question. That's recording stopped. What you are doing is very impressive. Did you think of some, because I noticed that in some cases, as you mentioned, recording in progress, the use of SSVS prior did not lead to improvement and vice versa, like for prediction of 8 cycles ahead for unemployment. Do you have any idea of like economic reasons for which variables this would work, for which problems that would work, for which this wouldn't?
For that question, I considered why the SSVS is effective for some, but not for. But I couldn't, especially the economic reason. I couldn't find any economic reason. Yeah, so it's still my research topic. I think it's. I don't know the economic reason. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, while other people are preparing their question, may I have a short one for Professor Sugita?
Yes.
We start out with the VAR, which is a Markov process, and then we change that into a Markov switching VAR. So, either from a credibility point of view, is there any way we can justify the model or validate the model before we're using it?
Yes. Excuse me. I couldn't catch your question.
Yeah, the question is, why you think about Markov switching Markov? Because if you take the var, then the model is justified just a plain Markov process. Then we change into Markov switching. That means you change to break that into several different regimes. So any justification that why when we look at the data, what make we think about using Markov switching var? Justification of the model, and any way to validate that model?
I think that using these three variables, so far the many research papers used Markov switching model, and because there are mainly high volatility regime and low volatility regime, so Markov switching is very good for, I think, but some people think that the Markov switching is not fit, and rather than Markov switching, other nonlinear model would be better. But I in this paper, I just think the Markov switching. Yeah, is it clear?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that people have already done that, because this is not the focus of your paper, because there are many papers where they compare Markov switching models with the regular models and show by using BIS and other criteria that AIC, BIC, that in many cases works better. So your addition is not so much considering these models, but by adding SSVS prior to take care of the fact that some variables may not be useful. Yes. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay, so we have first question in the chat by Professor Yamaka. Why you consider leg 4?
Oh, there are no reason for that. Just of course, maybe it's just it's quarterly data, and maybe it's better to check whether the lag 4 is enough or not. But in this case, I just set to be 4. Yeah, and it's better to. But if you consider the longer lags, maybe just SSVS will be put the restrictions on 0 for the longer lags. So I don't know. I think the just conventional use for 4. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So I think Professor Yamaka asked this question because sometimes people do select the best leg based on the model. Yeah, yes. We just selected it for 4, and 4 makes sense. I agree, because it's a year. Right. Okay. Okay, it says here's another. If you consider the best leg, it might outperform other models. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Other questions? Okay. So if we don't have any more questions, so let's thank Professor Sugita once again. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to speak here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the very interesting talk.
Okay,
so the next talk, and we are going a little bit earlier, but nothing wrong with that. We'll have more time for other discussions. Next presentation will be by Professor William Briggs on the skill of influential predictions. Professor Briggs, please.
Hello, everybody. I think I'm on. Let's see here. Oh, wow, here we go. All right, that's me. I'm not at Cornell anymore. I noticed at the beginning of the announcements, I should just say that, so nobody at Cornell thinks I'm trying to step on their toes. This is the skill of influential predictions. So I'm going to talk about skill. I'm going to talk about predictions. what an influential forecast is versus a non-influential forecast. I think there's a bit of feedback again, perhaps. So skill is the ability of a model,
somebody needs to do
any model. Yeah, so either there's feedback or there's there's somebody.
Okay.
Okay, well, skill is the ability of a model to predict better than, it doesn't have to be a simple or a default model, but skill is the ability of one model to predict better than a second model. Now, usually we do this calculation of skill by reference to a default model, and I'll explain what that is. Models without skill should not be used. And I say that predictive ability of a model is superior to any other measure of model goodness. And therefore I say predictions have to be useful. Predictions must have skill to be able to use them. Models must have skill to be able to use them. If you can't demonstrate skill with a model, I think do we have feedback, or is that somebody whose microphone is not muted?
Yep. I think somebody's microphone is unmuted because we had the same problem with the previous talk. Okay. I think we need to please, everybody who is not talking, switch off them, mute their microphones.
Okay, I think that's better. Now, why not hypothesis testing instead of looking at skill? I'm going to define all this stuff in a minute, but hypothesis testing, whether it's either frequentist or Bayesian,
something is going on.
It sounds like me. It's almost like it's feedback.
Yeah, I think it's the big microphone in the room somewhere because everybody else is muted. Can you switch off the microphone in the room?
Let me do a test. Test 1, 2, 3.
No, it's still.
We're still getting the feedback. If anybody can hear me in the main room, could you please switch off the microphone? We're getting terrible feedback here. Let me pop mine down just to make sure that it's not doing it. The reason we don't want to use hypothesis testing, Bayesian or frequentist or anything like this, is that these things always say something about the model and the data that you have in hand. And since it's always possible to fit a model almost perfectly or even perfectly, you're always going to have a weakness. But if you're going to instead look at a model's predictive ability, then you have a true test. You have a true test of a model's ability to say something about the world. And that's the way science should be, and not in the way that it has been. It has been since we've been using hypothesis tests and the like to judge models. I don't know if anybody can hear me in the main room, but if they could please shut off that microphone, eliminate the feedback.
I think they did.
All right, so prediction, they just did. Okay, sweet, thank you. So in order to confirm predictive ability, we need to use a model to make predictions never before seen or used in any way in creating the model. And then we can use formal verification techniques. There's all kind of formal verification techniques. We just saw one was the mean forecast, forecast error, the mean square forecast error in the previous talk. But there's lots of different ways to do verification. But even better is to look at a model performance as it is actually used in practice. So a model can be good for one person and useless to a next person, depending on how they're implementing that model. But if you put model goodness in terms of predictive ability, it's at least very simple, it's very plain, it's easy to explain to somebody. Nobody understands what a p-value is. They're based on pure magical thinking. But if you say this model, it makes good predictions, and in particular, it makes skillful predictions in a way that I'll describe in a moment, then you have something. Then you have real demonstration of ability. Okay, what do I mean by influential predictions? Well, there's non-influential models, any kind of physical model, not any kind of physical model, but for instance, weather forecasts or solar wind forecasts or something like this. Any model in which a man-made cause is not present. You could complain about the weather and all this kind of stuff, but you're really not going to be able to change it. You're really not going to be able to change, for instance, a solar wind forecast or the wind coming off the sun, and they do make these kinds of forecasts. So we could judge these kinds of models just by their ability to predict reality, by being able to predict nature. So we're fine. We have all kinds of methods to do that. Influential models, on the other hand, are things like the Fed rate. The Bank in America, the Fed sets the prime rate, and all kind of economics are downstream from that. Stock predictions can be influential. A major stock brokerage firm like Goldman Sachs or something could be bullish on some stock, and that would drive the sales of that stock up. And therefore, it looks like their prediction has done well, but is that because of their influence? Inside companies, sales forecasts can be influential. If a company sets a sales forecast, sets a target based on whatever model, informal or formal, that they have, why then people are going to key to that forecast. And is that forecast, there's some amount of influence based on that forecast. So an influential forecast, an influential model, an influential prediction is any kind of model in which man-made cause is present. So for instance, in particular, the Fed chairman predicting that interest rates will rise or fall or stay the same. There's a prediction in the wind in America right now that there will be 3 short-term rates, at least at the start of 2022. They're not formal predictions per se. They don't have to be formal. But are they interesting predictions? And so how do we judge somebody who's making that prediction along with the Fed? Because the Fed, of course, sets the rates. And if they say they're forecasting, they're going to predict, they're forecasting that they might raise the rates. How do we judge how well they're doing, or those who are operating on the Fed's predictions to see how well they're doing? This can be very confusing, but maybe this next one will point this out. So for instance, the Central Bank of Japan found out that their forecast, the forecast that they make, affected economists' models and the forecast that the economists were making, but not vice versa. So for instance, the economists would make predictions of the same observables that the Central Bank of Japan would, but those forecasts from the economists outside the bank weren't affecting the forecast of the central bank. But of course, the central bank forecasts were affecting the economists' predictions. So now how do we judge these economists and their predictive ability if they're being influenced by the central bank? So I'll come to a more careful example of this. And there we have again, brokerage predictions can influence company managers' guidance and all of this. This is kind of well studied in a sense. It's a known effect in forecasting and in forecast analysis. But what people don't have up to this point is a way to analyze it. They have a way to analyze it to discover it's there. But then how do you use that knowledge in rating how well or how skillful a model is? And that's what I want to do. So let me start with first a non-influential forecast. Something in which at least nobody can influence the presence or absence of a tornado, and look at how we define skill before moving on to a more complicated definition of skill in these influential models. Now, these are a very famous set of forecasts made at the start, I believe it was either the start of the 19th century or the very end of the, at the start of the 20th century or at the very end of the 19th century. A soldier named Finley was making tornado forecasts. Then it was a nascent field. People, of course, have great interest in predicting tornadoes. And he observed, or he predicted tornadoes. He predicted tornadoes and observed whether or not they were there. So for instance, one is a prediction of a tornado being present, and the observed is that tornado indeed being present. He observed that 28 times over the period in which he did his study. He predicted a tornado would be present and one was not present 72 times. He said no tornado would be present when one was 23 times. And he said no tornado would be there and one was not there for 2,600, 2,700 times. Altogether, there's about 2,800 tornado forecasts that he made over a certain period of time, of which 2,700 were correct. And this is an accuracy of 96.6%. It sounds like the model is doing very well. However, I could have a reference model. That's his model. This is Finley's is the expert model, the whatever he based the statistics on. Now I'm going to have a default model. I'm going to call it the lazy tornado forecast. For every period, I'm just going to say no tornado is going to come. That's my model. It's a very simple model. It just says no tornado every time. So of course there's prediction of one, never make it, so there'll be no observed tornadoes at that time. So we just take his number, that would have done 0 times. Again, I make no predictions, so there would be no times that I predicted one and we observed no tornadoes. However, there were times when I predicted there'd be no tornado and there actually was. There was 51 times that there were tornadoes. There was 28 plus 23 tornadoes in the data sample, and the rest of the times would be accurate. So this model right here, this lazy tornado forecast, gives an accuracy of 98.2%, which is better than Finley's 96.6%. Therefore, we shouldn't use Finley's model. We should use this lazy tornado forecast. We'd say that Finley's model has no skill when compared to this lazy tornado forecast. Now, of course, these are very simple forecasts. These are forecasts of yes or no, present or absent, true or false, dichotomous predictions. And we could analyze this in terms of probabilities, although Finley didn't give them in terms of probabilities. If you have forecasts that are indeed given in terms of probabilities, we can analyze those in terms of this kind of skill. It's very easy. I'm going to walk us through a little bit of that. Or if we have differential cost loss, if we look at a false positive different than we look at a false negative, maybe we're willing to suffer a few false positive tornado forecasts, meaning we're going to say a tornado is going to be there, and we're willing to be a little bit wrong about that just so people are more prepared. And we don't want to be wrong about saying no tornado is coming and one actually does, so that people aren't ready for it. Well, all that can be worked into this, and we can define skill with respect to all of these kinds of measures too. I'm not going to go into all that. That's kind of complicated to work all that out and show it. So I'm just going to show in terms of these very simple yes or no things, and just tell you all that other stuff has been worked out. Okay. So how did we work it out for the very simple cases? So we're going to have some expert model, some model that we have consideration, and we're going to say X is going to predict Y. And we're very much interested in the probability that the model is accurate. And we would like it to be more accurate than a naive model or a lazy model or the default or base model. In this case, we're going to define without any loss of generality that this model is always to say that Y will not be present, because we're going to define Y as rare. We have some background information, E here, which is always present. Could be anything that you have on hand. And we're going to say the probability of Y with respect to that is less than 1/2. This is absolutely without loss of generality. We could define it to be anything. Y could, the naive forecast could be 1, it could be 0, it doesn't matter. Here, though, just to make it easy, we're going to think about it in terms like this. So it's very simple. We'd like our model accuracy to be better than the naive model accuracy. And if that's the case, we have skill. Very simple. And you could work it all out. This just turns out to be the probability that Y equals 0 versus the probability we're accurate with the expert model X. And you can boom, 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 work it out and say that it's the probability, given we've said there's going to be an event happening, the probability of the event happening, that probability has to be larger than given when we said the event was not, well, was also going to happen, but it didn't.
Okay,
as long as
can I ask a question?
Skill
sure. Can we interrupt the people asking in the middle, right? Do you,
Absolutely, absolutely.
Could you go back to the previous slide? Could you go back to the previous
Sure.
slide? Okay, is that mean
Yes, this one?
X is the cause of Y? That means the causal?
No. X is the prediction. X is the model. X is the model predicting Y.
Yeah, but when you write out
X
probability
is,
of Y
X
equal
is
X,
the model that you come up with. No, dude, you're just saying, so this is, I'm only showing you you have a very simple, you have a model X, and the model X can say 0 or 1, and Y will turn out to be only 0 or 1. And so you're checking, this is your model accuracy. How accurate were you in making your predictions? So in Finley's case, which I'll go over again, that he said, here he was right 28 times, and here he was right 80 times. So he was right 96% of the time. So X in this case is the prediction, and the observed is Y. X is any model that's just a very simple prediction of Y, versus the very simple prediction of saying Y will never happen, as in this lazy model, lazy tornado forecast. Does that make sense?
yeah, I just want to see, that looked to me like one probability bigger than another one means like this one caused the other one in terms of causal thing. So when you say X predict Y, and
no. Yes.
Yeah, it looked to me like that means X is there's a causal effect between X and Y. That means X, well, if X happen, then Y happens.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I got you. In fact, I'm going to introduce that's not the case. I only mean this to be a proposition. This is the proposition that Y equals X, that the model made the correct forecast. That's all this means. This is just a proposition that the model made the correct prediction, and this is the proposition that the lazy model made the correct prediction. I'm going to introduce a variable in a minute that will be causal. This has nothing to say about cause whatsoever.
Okay, go on.
So, yeah, well, and again, this is the skill. This all boils down. It's very simple in this aspect. Like I say, we could turn X into a probability prediction. If you think there's a tornado going to happen, whether you can give that a probability based on whatever model output that you have. Remember, we're looking at model output. X is model output. I should have emphasized that better. X is the result of some model that you have that's sitting off scene. So X can be the absolute prediction, as it is here. It could be a probability. It's the result of some model that we don't see, because what we're doing here is we're judging a model's predictive ability. That's all we're doing. I'm not actually trying to form a model to predict the thing of interest. I'm taking that as a given, and now I want to see how well that model has performed. Of course, I can only look at these situations when the model says something is going to happen, and that's just so that it's different from the lazy model. That's trivial condition. Now here's Finley. So given the number of times he said that his model said the tornado would happen, the probability that it did was, he said the tornado would happen according to his model. The probability that it didn't was about 72%. So the skill condition has been violated. Skill has not been achieved. I'm not going to get into how you would estimate these things. You can, I mean, you could put priors on them. You could do all that kind of stuff. I'm just going to leave the raw, the sort of basic estimation here. He had 100 times in which he said the tornado would be present, so we're just going to use these very crude estimates to give an indication here of the estimates. Okay, now let's move on to influence. Influence, we can think, one way to think of influence anyway is as a switch, Z. Now here we do have cause. When this switch is on, Y must take either 0 or 1, depending on whether X is 0 or 1, because of some influence. X is still the result of a model, but whatever is happening with that model, there's some cause behind here that Y is caused to equal X regardless of any other cause. So, the manager, the sales manager predicting sales will rise or you'll be fired. So your sales will rise. And that's because of it's an actual causal relation in this case. Z is a cause, or Z indicates that a cause of the forecast is present. And also we can have that switch off when there's no cause. And then we'd say that Y is under the influence of all other causes except for whatever this influence is. And that is to say that Y will be equal to 1 or 0 depending on non-influential causes. Whatever causes Y to happen, whatever causes the Fed rate to go up or down, whatever causes the stock price to go up or down, whatever causes a tornado to happen or not. The prediction then, it becomes genuine and non-influential. That is to say, the prediction is just some model in which no cause of that model is influencing Y in any way. Now, if we knew when if the Fed is announcing, for instance, if the Fed is announcing we are going to raise rates on February 1st or whatever, that is a model, if you like, of the rates going to go up or down. Of course, it is a completely influential model because they said the rates were going up. And then when the rate does in fact go up, why, the model has been verified. It was 100% accurate. However, it's not really a fair test of that model because the influence of the people making the forecast is exact. They are causing the rates to go up. Of course, their prediction that the rates would go up was true. So if we have a set of forecasts in which we know those exact times when influence was present, when the switch was on, and we know when the switch was off, all we have to do, if we know, is take those times when the switch was on out of our sample and just analyze the predictive ability of the model when the switch is off, when there's no influence of the model. And we can just use all the standard verification techniques that we have. Of course, we have the problem that we don't always know when that switch is on. For instance, the economist forecasts in Japan, when they're using the Bank of Japan's guidance, we don't quite know when the influence is there or how strong that influence is on. So we have to estimate when Z is on and when Z is off. Okay. Just for ease of notation here, I'm going to let Y sub 1 be the proposition that Y equals 1, that X sub 1 is the proposition that X equals 1, and so on. And I'm going to drop the E for notational ease. Although it's always there, we must remember it's always there. And then the skill condition basically boils down to this. You can prove all this. It's just exactly the same thing. It's the probability that the model is right when still considering that the observable itself is rare. It's just those times in which the model said the Y would happen, and it did, when the switch is off, when there's no cause of X to Y. X is not causing Y. And then that still has to be better when the times you say the Y will be 1 and it isn't. And you could break this apart into just condition on Z0 here. And we assume, of course, that the switch sometimes is off. If the switch is not sometimes off, well, then we don't have we only have influential forecasts, and they're not interesting to verify, because if the switch is always on, the observable is always being caused by by X, and so we don't have anything interesting to say. Well, you can work it all out in just this simple case. Like I say, you could do the non-simple case where the forecast model spits out a probability instead of a dichotomous yes or no, or where there is differential cost and loss for false positives and false negatives. But I'm just going to show you this very simple case. This is the skill condition under influence. It's just almost exactly like the skill condition was when there was no influence, except for this term right here. It's still the probability that the model matches Y when Y happens, and that has to be better than the probability that Y didn't happen when you said it did. But here we're going to subtract off a factor for when the probability of the model, probability that the switch is on. It's the probability of influence. And so that makes it tougher, just as we would expect, to prove skill, to prove there's anything happening with the model. So for instance, if the economists in Japan are only just mimicking whatever the Bank of Japan is saying, the switch is always on, and therefore the probability of Z is 1, and there's no way you could ever have a skillful model. And so they're not doing anything by doing that. They're not doing any better than the bank is doing, and there's no way they could, because they're just being directly influenced by it. Now here, this gets kind of complicated and mind-boggling here, because we're trying to think, remember, we're trying to think of, we're judging a model's predictive ability. There's some model out there that is spitting out an X, okay? And we're trying to say, how good is that model doing? And then we're also saying that sometimes there's people influencing the observable Y. Now, they could be influencing the observable Y just at times that they feel like it, but they could also be influencing it at times differently. When it's X is going to be 1, then when X is going to be 0. In other words, they could say, so that the Fed, or anybody looking at Fed rates or something like this, looking at models of Fed rates, might think that there's more influence going on when a rate is going to be risen than when a rate might stay the same or go down or something like this. And we can allow for that kind of a thing. It's more complicated than I don't necessarily, everybody to understand exactly what I mean here. I'm going to go through an example here. So what I've really done here, I'm going to go through an example with the Fed rate. But what I'm trying to do is just give you tools, okay? So we have ways right now of looking at how good models predict. We have all kinds of verification methods for these things to assess skill. And these can be used. But if there is influence or influence is suspected, we have to be able to judge those models on a fair basis. We have to subtract out the influence. Otherwise, those models will look much better than they really are. People aren't really doing anything except just mimicking the influence. Okay, so let's look at this. This is only an example. I am not an expert in monetary policy by any means, and I welcome all criticisms and comments about interest rates, interest rate forecasting and all that kind of thing. So basically what I did, this is just from the Bank of St. Louis, one of the repositories for the data of all this. This is the fund rate. Every time it was set, it soared up into enormously large values in the 80s, and it's at the present level of, I think this goes through July or August of 2021, extremely low rates right now, and with all the consequences that entails. So it's very important, at least we can agree about this, it's very important to get these forecasts right. If you're going to guess exactly what they're going to do, when they could do it, money could be made, or you can make better decisions. So you want to use those models that take into account all the information that it can, including the influence of the Fed board themselves. Okay, now in this particular data set, this is just an example, just to show you how this stuff works. I don't make any claims for these models or anything like this, just to show you how this all goes. There were 806 observations in that data set. 325 times the rate decreased from the previous period. So the previous period's here, we decreased down to here. 480 times that rate rose or it stayed the same. Now, just because that earlier math, we don't have to do this. This is just purely for convenience sake. We can define the times y equals 1, the event y equals 1, as the rate falling, and y equals 0 as the rate increasing or remaining the same. And that's just because that's rare. The times the rate decreased were rarer than the times it rose or stayed the same. Now I'm going to introduce two models. X is persistence. X is my expert model. X is the model I want to test. X is persistence. Persistence is used all the time in time series as a model, and it says Y will do exactly as it did in the period before. Persistence almost always turns out to be an extremely strong model. It performs very well. And really what you need to do is build a model that beats persistence, is skillful with respect to persistence. Because if you can't beat persistence, you can't beat the observable just doing whatever it did in the period before, then your model really stinks. So for instance, weather forecasts, I think Vladik last week was talking about weather forecasts. These are now very good and they do beat persistence. Climate models, however, for instance, do not beat persistence. Persistence is still better. And then I'm also going to define the same lazy model as I had before, which is to say the rate will either rise or stay the same. This is not the best example for the Fed because I realize they're going to possibly raise the rate and there's our influence. So how do we do all this? Well, we can look at this. We're first going to look at the terms, the Fed persistence model, terms of skill when there's no influence. We're going to assume there's no influence at all, no influence whatsoever in this case. So we predicted that the rate would, again, the rate would decrease, and we observe it decreased 181 times over this period of time. And we predicted it would decrease, although it did not, 144 times. We said it would increase or stay the same, and it decreased 144 times. And we said it would stay the same or rise, and it did 335 times. So that accuracy of persistence is 64%. The lazy model of simply saying 0 all the time, that only has an accuracy of 60%. So persistence does better than the lazy model. Not surprising. Now, but then you can come in here and do the same chart for your expert model. Now we're going to look at a time when we have some kind of a switch on or off. And I'm too inexpert about Fed policy and Fed goings on and everything to come up with an estimate of the probability that the influence is on. But when it's on, assuming it's on at certain times, we can calculate that same skill condition. We can ask the skill condition, is the probability of the one minus the other? And we see we have skill. Skill is when we have a positive number here. That's what indicating the model, the expert model is out predicting the lazy model all the way up until about 4% of the time. If there was influence and we knew about that influence, in other words, the Fed is directly manipulating the rate and saying they're going to manipulate it in advance, and we're calculating against that model, and if that happened more than 4% of the time, then we have no skill, and persistence is not a good model to use. And this, just going to show it to you, I have no hope of explaining this, but we could look at those times again. We could say when the rate was going to stay the same or rise, and the probability that that influence was on, versus the times that the model said that it would fall, and influence is there. And we can calculate that same skill, and we see there's a whole range of probabilities of the switch being on for different situations, and we can still demonstrate skill. It's very complicated, very confusing, but it has to be, okay? Because we're trying to say something about a very complex topic. We're trying to say, how good is this model performing in the face of influence? Okay, we don't want to reward a model for getting it right when it had no choice but to get it right. We want to look at a model in terms of a fair comparison. So that's why we calculate skill in the first place, and this is why we have to remove this idea of influence. So I think this can be an extremely good tool. We could extend this to polls, political polls. Many polls are what we call push polls. Polls are released around election time in the United States, for instance, purely to influence the cause of the vote. That is to say, they're released purely as causal agents. They're put out in the world to cause a poll to go, the actual vote to go one way or the other. Stock market predictions, like I say, they're very influential. Goldman Sachs comes out for a stock. Why, that sounds like it's a good prediction, but of course they're also influencing it. And then they pull out of the stock at some time in the future after they've made their money. And then how do we rate how well they're doing, or somebody's a model based on a Goldman Sachs sort of a forecast? All that kind of stuff. And like I say, you could easily expand it to probability forecast, differential cost loss, all that kind of thing. All right, that's it. That's a very complex, short summary of all the math and everything. It's all in the paper. You can go and read it. But I at least hope that we move from testing, hypothesis testing, Bayes or frequentist or anything, and we move to testing models to make predictions of data they've never seen before in any way. Only then can we know that we have a model that's testing reality and is of any use to us. So thank you very much.
I didn't see Vladik, so may I jump in and replace him for a few minutes? Yeah, first of all, any questions for Professor Briggs, please, from the audience? For Vladik there.
Maybe there's something in the...
No, I switched off my video because I got problems with connection. So yeah. But thank you very much Professor Briggs for very interesting talk. Yes. So questions, and so Professor William has question. Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. Let me start. I have two questions for you. The number one is Mr. Sugita is talking about forecasting, and you are talking about prediction.
Yep.
What is the difference between the two?
Same thing. None. There's no difference.
Well,
zero.
May I suggest something else?
I say there's no difference. I say there's no difference because what you have is you have a model, and that model is based on all kinds of things that you put into it, and it's all in the past. If you're fitting a model right now, it's all in the past. If you say that's a valid model about reality, then you have to feed it conditions that were similar to, or scenarios, if you like, similar to the conditions in which you made your model. Any model fits into this framework.
Okay, this is the question that all students ask me, and here is my prediction. There's a big difference between the two. You can forecast everything, but you cannot predict everything. Because forecast is something, it's wrong, it's okay. But prediction, you cannot. Okay, that's my answer to students, okay? We can forecast everything, but we cannot predict everything. Okay, the question I really want to ask you seriously is, it looks like behavioral forecasting or behavioral economic. So there are two buzzwords in your talk. One is skill, the other one is influence. That everything makes real sense. But the problem is, just like just like a causal inference, you cannot make causal inference because there is something else that is missing. Namely, background knowledge of the subject matter, and that is very difficult to represent mathematics. So my question to you is there any way that you can try to import skill and influence mathematically into the model? Is that possible?
Absolutely, 100% agree with you. Yes, it's very difficult. In fact, I think it's unsolvable in some ways, especially we're talking about humans with free will and everything. We have to go to making a guess based on other outside information. But yes, you can, though, given that you've done that, and it's all very hand-wavy and everything, because of the very reasons that you said, you can predict model predictive ability. So you can build this skill and stuff back in order to improve models that you have. Absolutely, you can do that. That's done all the time in weather forecasting. They absolutely do that just in order to make the models better in kind of technical ways. But yes, that's done all the time with that. There's no influence in that in the weather forecasts, of course, but there is in these economics forecasts.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because...
If somebody asks,
it's very important.
Go ahead.
There are three Nobel Prizes in economics for behavior economic, and yet on the other one, they never look eye to eye to them. They always look down on them because they think that oh, you're just talking and it's not scientific. But I think it's an interesting question because 3 Nobel Prizes for behavioral economics during the last 20 years or so. That means it really makes sense. But why the other one?
It absolutely makes sense, especially when you consider a stock price is just an accumulation of people's thoughts. That's exactly what it is. So it's all the evidence that goes into people's, so behavioral is extraordinarily important. We have to figure, this is a tool at least to, once you think you've solved that problem or you have an estimate of it, you could use the math that I gave you, but it doesn't solve the problem of how to think about influence, no.
Okay, can I interrupt you for a second? It looks like participants are not able to switch to unmute themselves. So I think the only way to ask a question is, if you cannot unmute yourself, type the question in the chat. Because I know Dr. Songsak raised.
I do see there's a question. I see somebody said, I'd like to know carefully about your skill and lazy method. Could you give me your file? Yes, I can. In the book, when the book comes out, the paper has all the math. The file is available. It's listed in the paper. The URL for all that kind of stuff. You can get all that and be able to download it. No problem.
Okay, Dr. Songsak,
yes,
you have a question.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you very much, Professor Brick. And actually, I have seen your model, very interesting. And I have something that I like to have your comment, because from the binary choice model, usually I'm not sure that the model that used previously, Philly model also, they used the binary choice model just now to make the prediction. But I wonder that that is going to be using, for example, logistic or the probability models, because that is going to be like a symmetric distribution. So I tried to do it a little bit more, and because when the observed data is going to be like biased toward something, let's say, to be zero, a lot of zero instead of one. So that is going to be a symmetric one. So if you use a symmetric distribution appropriately, the prediction might improve rather than using the, So my question is that going to be the asymmetric distribution is going to be consistent with your persistent model skill?
Yes, the persistence model just says y will be whatever it was last time. That's it. It doesn't even give a probability of y. It just says y will be whatever you get. And again, I want to emphasize, you could use any kind of model. Any kind of model. X is the prediction of that model. You could have logistic regression. You could have any kind of asymmetry in the error terms that you want. Anything. It could be a machine learning model, AI model, anything. X is the output of that model. All right. And now we want to judge how good that output does on independent data. So this is just a verification method. So persistence itself won't change, because that's just saying whatever happened last time. You could easily turn persistence into a probability model just by the obvious way. However many times it was one, that's the probability.
Part of the question is how, if the model is binary, if it predicts whether there will be a tornado or not, then your method works. But what I think what Professor Songsak is saying is that many prediction models are probabilistic. If the model doesn't predict the value of X, it predicts the probability of X. What do you do in this case? How do you determine your characteristics?
Exactly. So I don't know if I didn't do a good job emphasizing it, but yes, X can be a probability. X is the output from your model. I didn't want to get the. I just wanted to show a simple math. I didn't want to get into, because it's not the math is not the point to me anyway. So yes, X can be a probability. X can be a number. Or a number attached to a probability distribution. Like X could be, like in regression, X is a normal distribution. Given little x1, little x2, little x3, little xp, well, then the model spits out a normal distribution conditional on the value of the predictor variables. So X is the output of the model, however that output looks. And I only showed us the very simplest ones just because I'd hope the math would be a little bit easier to follow along.
So basically, in case we predict probability, let's consider a very simple model. X is a probability of predicting a tornado. So then what do you have? So in all the cases when X, for example, is equal to 0.8, you find the probability of tornado actually happening. And if it's greater than 0.8, it's good. If it's smaller than 0.8, it's not good. Is that what you're proposing?
You can work out all the math has already been worked out for probabilities, and because you don't necessarily then have just a single value skill measure. You could have calibration. What you're talking about is calibration, for instance. It's very well used. So the number of times that you said the event would happen with 80% probability, your model would set 80% probability. You'd like to have 80% of the time the thing happening. And every time your model spit out 40% of the time, that is to say, every time your model spit out 40% chance for the thing happening, you'd like to have 40% of the time the event actually occurring. And you do that for every probability, and that's called calibration. And long ago, it was proved by Shervish that a calibrated model, no matter what your loss function is, skill function, anything like this, outperforms an uncalibrated model. So you have to look at it in terms like that. All those kind of things are worked out. Those kind of things are worked out very well for all kinds of outputs of models. There's calibration in exceedance, there's calibration in probability, there's calibration in average. All those kinds of things are done. But what hasn't been done is when you try to take into account this behavioral aspect. When you want to look at the model itself, when you know that when you have known causal aspects to that model, and you want to remove those causes in order to judge the performance of the model.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, if there are no questions, let's thank the speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we are a little earlier. So is Professor Schaefer here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, okay, you can start.
I can start right away. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Right, so let me hang on a second here.
Matt, you have to stop sharing.
I have to start sharing.
No, I mean Matt.
Oh, right.
Previous speaker has to stop sharing.
Sorry. Okay, hang on. Let me fix this. What do I do here? This stupid thing's in a new share.
That's okay. I can buffer it up. Here we go.
Okay, wait a minute.
Yep, yeah. Good.
Did that work?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. So Professor Schaefer will give a talk, what's wrong with how we teach estimation and inference in econometrics, and what should we do about it? Please.
Okay, well, thank you again for the invitation and the honor to present to this group. And like Matt, I'm immensely impressed with the size of the audience, and I hope that what I have to say will live up to that. This is on a theme that it continues a theme that I sort of started a year ago, and so the first when I presented here, and the first few slides will look familiar. The presentation is really about pedagogy. It's about teaching, but I think it's pretty important because there's a lot that's wrong with how we practice econometrics, and I think it's hard to avoid the conclusion. And it's not just econometrics; it's applied statistics across the social sciences and other disciplines, and it's hard to avoid the conclusion that we got there partly because of how we continue to teach. And so I think it's also about the practice of econometrics, but I think how we teach has a lot to do with what's wrong with the practice of econometrics. So I see I'll be talking about the first problem here, which is about teaching statistical significance and null hypothesis significance testing, and why this is why this is a disaster. A little bit on why it's a disaster, because it's generally regarded now to be a disaster, and what we should do about it. And if there's time permitting, I can talk a little bit about something else we should do, but maybe I should save it till next year, which is about teaching causality versus teaching prediction. But I'm going to be talking about teaching or not teaching statistical significance, what we should teach instead. There's been a lot of attention in the applied statistics literature about this, most of it critical. The stuff that isn't critical, you could probably ignore because they've got it wrong. Basically everybody's listening to that we should be listening to is critical. And the economics profession is a bit late on picking up on this, but it's starting. So the Journal of Economic Perspectives symposium in 2021 had a symposium on there was a symposium on statistical significance with contributions from Imbens, who's one of the Nobel laureates this year, last year, 2021, Cassie and Miguel. The American Statistical Association has been was quicker off the mark, though this has been brewing for decades, really, so it wasn't really that quick. Where one of the quotes is scientific conclusions and policy decisions should not be based on whether a p-value passes a specific threshold. This is sometimes called dichotomania. And then there's another paper worth citing that appeared in Nature, co-signed by over 800 people, including me. I'm proud to say I was one of the people signing, that we should retire statistical significance in favor of a more nuanced interpretation. So what's wrong? Okay. Now why am I not, hang on, I need to get, I want to, can you see the heading at the top of the slide? Because I don't, it's blocked.
We see the heading is a typical NHST. Well, here.
You can see it. Oh, great. Okay, because I can't. But that's okay. You're the ones that need to see it. I should already know. So here's a typical problem. A researcher estimates some linear model, usually inserting some controls as well, and then tests whether or not beta is equal to 0 based on the estimated beta hat and the standard error. And if the p-value is less than 5%, the researcher declares victory. Beta is statistically significant, it's time to write it up and send it off to a journal. If it's not statistically significant, it gets worse, of course, because then they'll try changing the specification, and they'll do a little specification search until they can get the t-statistic until they get the p-value under 5%, and then declare victory and send it off to a journal. And that's really bad. Okay, so why is this bad practice? Well, I mean, forgetting about the p-hacking and just say the researcher is doing it honestly, it doesn't answer a question that we're interested in. As economists, we almost always want to know the answers to questions like how big is the effect and how precisely is it estimated? And testing this single point null hypothesis doesn't answer either of these questions. Okay, the researcher can reject the null because beta hat is extremely small but extremely precisely estimated, and therefore we can reject that it's 0. Or that the researcher can reject the null because beta hat is very large, but the standard error is also huge, but the confidence interval doesn't quite cover 0, so you can reject 0. Either way, you reject 0. Just knowing that you can reject the null hypothesis that beta is 0 doesn't tell you which of these cases it is. And of course, the difference is hugely important. It's amazing that so many papers with this mistake get circulated. Now, most of the wider debate has been about misuse of statistical significance and p-values and this kind of null hypothesis significance testing in the practice of research. And that's fine. And that's right. But the problem is rife in teaching as well. And you don't have to look very hard to find it. And I hear nostra culpa, we're guilty. Well, not just mea culpa and really nostra culpa. If I look at my old teaching materials, it's very uncomfortable. And the pervasiveness of the problem in research over many decades is, well, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that there's a causal role for how econometrics and statistics is taught across fields in this, and how it perpetuates this. So really getting this right in how we teach is really important, and I think fundamental to getting it right in how we practice econometrics and applied statistics more generally. So, pardon me. Here's an example from an econometrics textbook by Stock and Watson, the 4th edition. This is I rush to say, this is an excellent textbook. It's really, really good. I use this textbook when I teach my undergraduate students. I think it's a really good textbook. Yet, here's an example. And so this is a verbatim quote. To investigate possible gender discrimination in a British firm, a sample of 120 men and 150 women with similar job descriptions are selected at random. And then there's some information on the data. What do these data suggest about wage differences? Do they represent statistically significant evidence that average wages of men and women are different? Do these data suggest that the firm is guilty of gender discrimination in compensation policies? Explain. Now, what's wrong with this? Okay, we report the estimated wage gap, and that's part of the problem. That's good. But reporting just whether or not we can reject a zero gap is not good enough, okay? What if we can reject that the gap is zero, but we can't reject that it's 10 pounds a year? A gender wage gap of 10 pounds a year, well, you might, if you've got a massive amount of data, you might be able to reject that it's zero, but so what? 10 pounds is not. If we get the gender wage gap down to 10 pounds, we should declare victory and move on to other problems in the labor market. Okay, so how precisely estimated the gap is really, really a crucial question. Okay, all right. So let's now Imbens, as I said, a Nobel laureate this year, very, very good econometrician, comes out strongly against the misuse of statistical significance and p-values in this 2021 paper. Well, this is really good. You know, he's a leader in the field and influential and so forth. But he suggests that, and I quote, cases commonly arise in economics where a researcher is legitimately interested in assessing a null hypothesis versus an alternative hypothesis. And I'm going to say that he's wrong. This is less common than he suggests. He cites things like sheepskin effects in labor economics. That's about, you know, how important is the diploma versus years of education, and constant returns to scale, and the efficient markets hypothesis, and discrimination in the labor market again. And almost all of these, all but really the efficient markets hypothesis, is better served with an answer that includes how precisely estimated is it. Okay, so here's a fictional example. We reject the hypothesis that there's no gender-based wage discrimination, but we estimate the scale to be 0.1%. Okay, this is an example of statistically significant, but practically negligible. You really should be asking the question of how big it is and how precisely it's estimated. Why is the efficient markets hypothesis the exception? Because of arbitrage. Okay, even minuscule deviations from the efficient markets hypothesis can be economically important because arbitrageurs can make make bank on this. There's a new textbook out called not that new anymore, by CORE, and they have a supplementary textbook called Doing Economics, where they say in short, instead of asking students, is the difference in means statistically significant? Right, good. We encourage students to ask themselves, what do p-values tell us about the difference in means? Now, okay, here we go. Nostra culpa again. I contributed to this textbook, but I tried to convince them not to do this, but I failed. Is the difference in means significant from zero? Is different from zero, statistically significantly different from zero, is not informative. Students should be taught to ask, how precisely estimated is the difference in means? Okay, so what should be done instead? And my recommendation is that interval estimation and coverage should be the key teaching outcomes, not the point estimates. We should be reporting the interval estimate as the key estimate. And teaching why? Well, basically, in a sentence, teaching interval estimation rather than point estimation is the key estimate and automatically emphasizes uncertainty. Okay, so like students should be taught to say, based on this sample, we estimate the firm's gender wage gap to be 15%, 21%, 95% confidence interval. Now, when I say interval estimation, I mean frequentist confidence intervals, because if we're teaching in a frequentist context, if we're using a frequentist textbook. If it's a Bayesian course, then I would have the same recommendation. We should be teaching interval estimation again, except they're credible intervals as the key teaching outcome. Okay, we should be teaching interval estimation. Now, so just here's an example. Based on this sample, we estimate the firm's gender wage gap to be 15% to 21% based on a 95% confidence interval. Or based on this sample, we estimate the firm's gender wage gap to be 1% to 35% based on a 95% confidence interval. It's easy to see the difference between these two results. And it's easy to teach the difference between these two results. It's really easy to get this across to students, what the difference is. And if you compare the approach that Imbens and the core textbook recommend, it's just thoroughly opaque. We can reject the null hypothesis. There's no discrimination, and the p-value is 0.000, some tiny number, or the p-value is only 4%. Students don't know what to make of this. We don't know what to make of this, really. Okay, now, to teach these intervals, students in the frequentist setting now, students need to understand what coverage means. Now, teaching coverage is actually not that hard. And it's much easier than teaching p-values. So standard definition, well, two ways of defining, various ways of defining coverage, but the coverage probability is of a procedure is the probability that the interval will contain the true beta. And a 95% confidence interval is an interval estimation method with 95% coverage. So we need to, now if we're going to get it right, we need to emphasize to students the interval, not the beta, the interval, this is if we're teaching the frequentist paradigm, is random, because it's based on a sample data set. And the 95% coverage applies to the method. Now teaching this, as I said, is easier than it sounds. Then there are good analogies available, and I'm going to go through one which is relates to pin the tail on the donkey. Okay. Now, pin the tail on the donkey is a well-known children's game in some countries. At least I think the US, Canada, UK, I think Australia, New Zealand too, and so forth. Maybe elsewhere, but it's a children's game. It's a children's party game. And in a second, I'm going to show you. You put a poster of a donkey on the wall, and the donkey is missing its tail. And the child playing is given a tail with a pin or something sticky so that the tail can be attached to the donkey in the appropriate place, namely the back end of the donkey. The catch is that the child is blindfolded and then spun around so that they're disoriented. And then you point the child towards the donkey poster and tell them to put the tail as close as possible to where the tail belongs. Remember, their eyes are covered. And the other children can yell clues and suggestions, okay, higher to your right and so forth. And just to make the point, oh, my screen, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
You can? Okay, I'm going to.
But now we see not the full screen, we see the web page with the...
With pin the tail on the donkey. Here it comes.
Yes. But previously we saw the slides. Now we have the whole web page.
Okay. So can you see them playing the game?
No, we don't see.
Okay. It says I'm screen sharing. Let me try it. Let me try. Okay. Let me try this one. How about this one? Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. So there's the donkey, This is adult. This is an adult YouTube channel where they specialize in teaching children how to do games and stuff like that. So put the tail on, didn't get very close. And blindfold is still on. Oh, I didn't do very well. Okay, here comes another one. Okay, blindfold. Okay. And now we're going to hand him, he's going to take a tail. Oh, but first he's going to get spun around, so he's disoriented. Okay. And then he gets, now they're telling, they're giving him some clues, like saying, oh, look here, up. There we go. And then he gets to take the blindfold off. Okay. And then see how well he does. This is pin the tail on the donkey. Okay. You get the idea. Okay. So let's go back to, sorry, let me go back to my slides. And now share screen again. And I think it's this one. Okay, you can see my slides now. Okay.
Yes.
Right. And here's the aftermath of a play of the game of pin the tail on donkey. So here's the target point is the back end of the donkey, and this green one here is the winner. But actually, we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, we can teach confidence intervals and coverage really easily by saying, well, we change the game slightly. We go mystery pin the ring on the donkey. Okay, and we just make two changes, and we get a game which has a near complete range of characteristics with frequentist confidence intervals. In pin the ring on the donkey, you're blindfolded, but instead of a tail with a ring, you're trying to put a tail with a pin. You're trying to place a ring on the poster where the donkey's tail goes. Okay, and if the ring contains the point where the tail goes, you get a point. And if it doesn't, you get nothing. So you win by getting the ring around where the tail belongs. And it's mystery pin the ring on the donkey because you never take your blindfold off. Okay? Or put another way, the donkey is removed from the poster before the blindfold comes off. Okay, now it's based on a children's game. Okay, it's pretty close, but it is just like frequentist confidence intervals. Okay, so the ring is our confidence interval. The placement of the ring is random, so it's really easy to make the point that it's the ring that's random. Okay, not where the tail is. The tail is a constant. Where the tail belongs is a constant. Any one time we play the game, our ring will either contain or not contain the point where the tail belongs. The ring is no longer random after the end of play, just like a confidence interval. The size of the ring corresponds to the confidence level. If you want to win more often, use a larger ring. Okay, 99% confidence intervals, wider. The clues yelled by our friends are data points. So if you have very few clues, which is like a small data set, you'll do poorly. More clues and you do better. And if you play the game over and over, you get the frequentist property of coverage and repeated samples. 95% of the time we score a point. And our skills at understanding the clues is analogous to econometric theory and efficient estimation, but with an important difference. Okay. In the game, the only way to find out the actual coverage of our skills is to play the game repeatedly and then take off the blindfold. And that's just like Monte Carlo studies in econometrics. But in econometrics, the magic of mathematical statistics tells us what the coverage is going to be under certain circumstances. Okay, that's different. And the other difference is that we never get to take the blindfold off. In mystery pin the ring on the donkey, we never find out if we won. In real world econometrics, we never find out if our interval really did contain the true beta. Okay. Now, with this analogy, you can teach confidence intervals and students can walk away basically getting it. It's not that hard. It's a children's game. Okay. Now, a subtle point for that's easy for students to miss is that coverage properties apply to the procedure and not to the intervals they calculate. Now, this is an important subtlety, and lots of people get it wrong. And there was, I think, recently a survey of applied researchers where they asked them they gave them a multiple choice test and asked them, what is the meaning of this confidence interval? And most of the researchers got it wrong. Okay. Nevertheless, it's even if you don't get the definition right, students and researchers know that an interval 17% to 19% is a precise estimate of the gender wage gap, and 1% to 35% is a noisy estimate. Even if they miss the subtleties of the definition, they'll still get it, and that's good. And if we get this far, then I think we're doing really well, and much better than we're doing now. But it's clearly important for students in advanced courses and for practitioners that they understand this. And we can teach this point by extending the game. And we extend the game to Olympic mystery, pin the ring on the donkey. So it's now a game with an official rule book. So like in the modern javelin competition, the javelin has to land in a well-defined sector. Okay, that extends outward from the point where the javelin is launched. So if you throw the javelin and you're like way off to one side or the other, and it doesn't land in the playing area, it's an illegal throw and it doesn't count. Okay, and the same applies to Olympic mystery pin the ring on the donkey. The ring has to contain part of the poster on which the donkey appears. If the ring is placed outside the poster, the play is disqualified. And you find out after the play whether or not the ring was placed on the poster, whether or not it was a legal play. Or put another way, the donkey is removed from the poster and then the blindfold comes off. So you can see whether or not it's legal. Now, this is a simple but effective way to convey that the coverage property applies to the procedure. Okay, so prior to playing the game, a player may have a coverage probability of 95%. But after the throw, and then the donkey is removed from the poster and the player takes the blindfold off, they can see whether or not it was a legal play. And if it wasn't a legal play, then the player knows that they didn't score a point, even though the ex-ante coverage probability was 95%. Now, you might think this is not that important, but or not that, this is sort of a technical definition. It doesn't really matter that much. But this happens, and there's an important case in applied econometrics for it. A realized confidence interval contained values that are impossible for the beta to take, and yet the procedure can have nominal coverage equal to actual coverage. And this helps students also understand the difference between confidence intervals and credible intervals. They understand it helps a lot. And so we have Anderson-Rubin confidence intervals, which is constructed. It relates to estimation using weak instruments. You estimate an auxiliary equation, you assemble all the beta bars that can't be rejected. And so here you have the rejection probability. You calculate the p-value for all the possible alternative betas, and the area where this line is underneath 0.95, 95%. This gives you your confidence interval. So your interval is here. Okay. Now, here's another example. It's a narrower confidence interval, but notice that down here, the 75% confidence interval is empty. What does that mean? Well, the AR Anderson-Rubin procedure can still have 95% coverage ex ante. It's just that sometimes ex post, these confidence intervals can be empty. This is all that it means. And so, but the students may have some difficulties understanding this if you explain it in abstract, but if you explain it using the analogy of the pin the ring on the donkey and Olympic pin the ring on the donkey and so forth, it's much easier for them to get. Now, okay, for most students, it's not a problem if they forget formal definitions, but they remember the interpretation of coverage. But good students will remember, and also the ones who go on to more advanced study. So like it or not, if we're teaching this paradigm, we have to teach hypothesis testing and p-values. To do it properly, we kind of have to. So we have these sort of standard tricky definitions of confidence intervals that involve p-values, and I don't have to recite them now. So how do we teach this when it depends on something tricky like p-values? And I think my recommendation is to teach the p-value as an intermediate input. Okay, it figures on the way to the final product, which is the interval, the confidence interval, which has the coverage property. The coverage property is the property that's important. And so the p-value is a tool for constructing it. Okay, so p-values have their values, but sometimes p-values also sometimes sharp nulls represent sensible hypotheses. So it would be helpful to have a way of teaching p-values that it's not so readily misinterpreted. And here, I think I may have mentioned this in a previous presentation. Sander Greenland suggests converting p-values to the Shannon information S value, or surprisal value, which is minus log to the base 2 of the p-value. So it's just a monotonic transformation. And it's the information content of the p-value in bits. And actually, it's not hard to explain. It's all this, again, if we convert it to an analogy, a game, which students understand and researchers understand, then we reduce the chances of misinterpretation a lot. And this is the simplest of all games, flipping a coin. How surprised would you be? Let's say it's a fair coin, so it's 50%. For any given throw, there's a 50% chance of a head or 50% chance of a tail. How surprised would you be if you observed S heads in a row? That's exactly how you should respond if your test statistic has P as its p-value, where S is minus log to the base 2 of P. If you're very surprised by the number of heads you flip in a row, you may conclude that something is fishy about the coin. Okay, and so a small p-value may lead you to question your assumptions about the model and the null hypothesis. But that's it. It's really very simple. How surprised should you be? And the nice thing about it, is that the p-value is put into a metric that's really easy to understand. So minus log to the base 2 of 0.05 is about 4.3. Is 4 heads in a row surprising? Well, kind of, but not very. Okay, this is a really good way to get across to students and practitioners that the traditional 5% significance level is not very tough, and that a 95% confidence level yields interval estimates that are kind of loose. Okay, now, and sometimes sharp nulls represent sensible hypotheses, and the surprisal value is easy to interpret. And David Spiegelhalter, who's a statistician here in the UK, has written a nice book. He's normally, by practice, he's primarily a Bayesian, but he starts with his book with a frequentist presentation, and he talks about and p-values, and the example that he uses is one where the p-value or surprisal S value is appropriate, and it's about the physician Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was Britain's most prolific serial killer. He was a general practitioner, and based on the evidence we have now, he committed suicide in prison. He killed probably over 200 patients. He was very prolific, and if you assemble the evidence about the patients who died, well, they all tended to be kind of older. Okay, they all tended to die in the early to mid-afternoon, which just happened to be when he was doing his visits. And you can see why this pattern, how surprising is this pattern of patient deaths if he were actually innocent? Very surprising. I think it was I think another surprising fact was how many of them changed their wills so that he appeared in their wills. Okay, this is an appropriate use of p-values. Okay, let's. How am I doing for time? Because I have a little bit here on on prediction, but I think maybe I should just save it till next
No, I mean,
year.
we started earlier. We started earlier, so you can take your time.
I don't know. I think maybe I should just stick with interval estimation and keep the discussion. Well, all right. I can expand on this maybe for next year about teaching causality versus teaching prediction or forecasting. I like Matt. I use the term synonymously. If anybody here has read the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you'll recognize this quote: "Teaching causal inference is hard, really hard. You won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly hard it is." I mean, you may think it's hard to teach basic OLS, but that's just peanuts to teaching causal inference. What's the problem? We teach, basically the textbooks are, econometrics textbooks are a mess. Should I take questions now, or should I wait until I finish?
We're almost done, so I think I suggest we wait until you finish, because there will be other questions. Mm-hmm.
Okay, right. So we teach OLS as an estimation procedure as if it automatically generates estimates of causal effects, but only if we lay on extra assumptions that are really hard to explain, like conditional mean independence and so forth. And expositions in textbooks often don't clearly distinguish between OLS as a prediction tool and OLS as a tool for estimating causal effects. And this is one reason why, by the way, I really like the Stock and Watson book, because in the latest edition they are very clear about this, and that's really good. But what they don't do, where they still go wrong in my view, is they teach causal effects first, and then they go back to OLS as a tool for prediction and forecasting when these extra assumptions aren't needed. And I think students just get this is just confusing, and I think we should teach prediction first. The theoretical assumptions for OLS predictive inference are much easier to teach and to satisfy in practice. And the key assumption is about out-of-sample prediction. The observation that for which we're going to predict y hat is drawn from the same sample, same characteristics data as our data set. This is easy to motivate and justify, and it makes teaching the mechanics of OLS much easier. Like, why are we minimizing the sum of squared residuals? And if students are already comfortable with OLS and prediction generally, it'll help them understand why estimating causal effects is hard. It also facilitates introducing time series econometrics and forecasting, and it facilitates introducing machine learning, which is going to be a standard component of undergraduate courses. Okay, so maybe I'll do more about this in a year's time, but that's basically my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. So we have a question by Dr. Songsak. He already raised his hand. Dr. Songsak, please.
Yes, thank you, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor Tachefa. I have a very quick question. And it is agreeable to use the CI, confidence interval estimation. This is a very good suggestion. It seems that there are some arguments about the distribution of the error term leading to the p-values argument. Shall we use, for example, the least square estimator without assuming any distribution, because the method per se doesn't need any distribution at all, and by the method, and then we do the bootstrapping to have the confidence interval estimation, and then we estimate the CI confidence interval. Could it be the appropriate rate for the estimation?
Very good point. I'm agnostic myself about how we teach this. Probably I would continue to teach the derivation of confidence intervals based on the assumptions of, the required assumptions for the rest of the model to derive the distribution of beta hat. But in practice, as you say, we don't like having our confidence intervals and estimates rely heavily on strong assumptions, and bootstrapping is a way of loosening those. You raise the interesting question of, should we teach confidence intervals as something we can estimate using bootstrapping and resampling? And that's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer for it because I'm not sure myself. Probably I would continue to do it the way I do now, and then teach bootstrapping to follow on from that as a way of, well, if we don't want to make these assumptions, this is how we can obtain interval estimates anyway. But I can't put my hand on my heart and say this is definitely the right way to do it, because you may be right that maybe this is actually a better way of doing it. Maybe. I'm honestly not sure. I'm inclined to think that they should learn the theory anyway first, so that they know that there are theoretical reasons, that there are theoretical justifications for doing it. But I'm honestly not sure. Honestly not sure. It's a really good point.
Yes, may I say something about this? I think that if we don't put the distribution of the error terms, so we fall into the area of semi-parametric estimation. So if the sample size is sufficiently large, we do have a sampling distribution for the parametric part of the model without having model on the error term. And we have, Professor Songsak, we have almost, if the sample size is large, there's no problem, even if we don't put the functional form of the distribution of the error. But if the sample size is small, then there's no other way than using bootstrap.
That's a good point, and that's for practice. And I think so we can get a definite recommendation for what to do in practice, but how should we teach it? That's a really hard question. What do you think?
What you teaching? What
teaching should the question that was raised was, what I think was raised was, well, if we're going to teach interval estimation,
yes,
what should we teach first in terms of where the interval comes from? Should we teach it by deriving it from the characteristics of the model and mathematical statistics and the sampling distribution of beta hat and so forth? Or should we be more practical and teach about resampling and bootstrapping, and this is where the interval comes from? What should we teach first? I don't know. It's a really good question.
Well, from my point of view, well, first of all, Mark, thanks for talking about p-value. The issue that Matt and I was for some time we have, but there is a little confusion here, because in the textbook that students learn that they make an equivalence between testing and confidence interval. Okay, so if we say p-value is not good, but we say confidence interval is good, they get confused. They're confused because so the only way I can explain to them is that you do things with confidence interval, learn to do confidence interval, but don't use the confidence interval to derive the associative test. That's what the only way I say. The second confusion, you may comment on it. If you change the p-value to another thing like the S value or whatever base factor, something like that, a student had the impression like that. Oh, inside still have p-value. So my explanation is this: p-value by itself is a good piece of information, but it's not enough. It's not enough to make the decision to reject something, but it is useful. So the question many people say, oh, I don't know how to do a Bayesian statistic because I have problem with the prior. So I want to, and if you say p-value is no good for test and I need to test, then I use Bayes factor. So they just transfer they're still using p-value, but transfer that to Bayes factor. So how you explain to them in that case?
They shouldn't. My response to them would be, why do you want a point? Why do you want to test a point?
Right.
Yeah. Why do you care? I mean, okay, so let's test whether or not it's exactly equal to 2. Okay, I can reject that it's exactly equal to 2. Well, I could have told you that anyway. What are the chances that anything is exactly equal to 2? You know, who cares? Nobody cares. I want to know what your estimate is and how precisely estimated is it. That tells me something useful. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, we're talking.
I think I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Excellent talk. I like your idea of coverage probability deriving the confidence interval, avoiding the p-value. But another way to avoiding the p-value, as we know, we use the deriving, using the best unbiased estimator to derive the confidence interval.
Right.
But we have derived a method following using that confidence level and the precision, and then could go back to find the sample size, and then you go back to collect the data, and then you don't need a test, and you just make your estimator is within your scope of the position. You understand? So that means here, suppose we want to estimate the population mean mu, right? So we know the population is roughly approximately normal, and we give 95% confidence level, and we see our population mean and sample mean mu is in the 0.1 times of standard deviation. I'm okay. So we go back to find the sample variance, sample size is 385, something like this. And then we collect the data, and then we use the sample mean and to be the estimate population mean. That's within our confidence level and within our position.
So what's your question?
We had many people on this one here in recent years.
What's your question?
I mean, that's another way to using the confidence interval coverage probability.
Right.
To teach you the statistics.
As long as we're teaching interval estimation, I'm happy with it. I think the fundamental problem with how we teach is that we're so focused on obtaining a point estimate that we fail to convey to our students the inherent uncertainty in that point estimate.
Yes,
and they don't really get it.
Yeah, that is the problem of set estimator in partial identification nowadays. But the question for pedagogic reason, I wrote with Tony a couple of textbook statistics in that we have 2 or 3 chapters on testing. I want to apologize. I want to take it out, okay? I want to take it out, but I cannot. The question is, if I teach statistics, students will say, oh, you only teach me prediction and estimation. How about testing? Okay? They will ask that because they said, I tell them, you don't need to test. And they say, no, we do. Because many on the textbook, on the software, there's a testing. So we need to test. So could you tell me how to test if we must?
Well, but then you should respond by saying, what do you want to test? What do you want to test?
They say the same thing. And my answer is, temporarily, my answer at this moment is that use Bayesian test. At least, if you must test, then at least use Bayesian test. Logically, it's not wrong.
Oh, but even in the Bayesian world, we don't really care whether beta is equal to 2 or not.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't care. It doesn't matter. You're the Bayesian frequencies, whatever. Who cares? Nobody cares whether or not it's exactly 2. We want to know, what's the range of plausible betas. Now you can use. I'm agnostic. I mean, there's between whether frequentist or Bayesian, whatever, as long as it's interval estimation.
Well, but they need to test in time series. They need to test stationary mark.
That's right. Oh, that's right. That's different. That's an example where a test of a sharp hypothesis is a sensible thing to do. That's like it was Harold Shipman guilty? Okay, there's a big difference between guilty and not guilty.
I tell them, don't use grandeur or whatever test in time series. Go to learn Bayesian econometric, and they refuse because too much trouble. See, too much trouble. That is one thing. But the other thing I really want is I'm going to write a new text in statistics. Should I take out testing hypothesis completely?
No. You have to make them justify why you want a sharp answer. Okay, it's really about sharp hypothesis.
You know what the answer? The answer is I don't have the answer. The answer is from my software. My software asked me to put in the p-value. Okay.
Okay. Well, I don't think we can blame the software providers. They're demand driven. If people want, if users demand nonsense, then it's not their fault that they provide the nonsense that users demand. What could we? I don't want to blame them. I want to blame us basically for teaching.
There are many situations. It looked like the testing makes sense because they are not testing about a specific value, but they test whether or not A is a cause of B. Okay, is A, B is a cause of effect, and that is not about 1 point, or is that grandeur, whatever causality based on grandeur causality should A imply B, or something like a scenario, like thing like that. My answer at this time is simply okay. If you must test, try to avoid as possible. If you can replace your testing problem by an estimation, that will be great. But if you cannot, then use Bayesian testing.
That's okay.
That's the only thing I know by now.
That's okay. But I think the first thing they have to do is get the question right.
Right.
Once you get the question right, the rest is, then, a lot of the battle is over. And people who ask the question, when students ask the question, can we reject whether or not beta is equal to 1.3, we've already lost the battle. If that's their question, we've lost. We failed.
Well,
they have to ask the right question.
But how about if mu is greater or equal than 5?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So
that's better.
It's not 1 point. See, it's positive or negative. Let's say.
That's okay. That's better. Though usually in econometrics, we have a parameter in mind, and we want to know how big it is. Usually, and if they can get that right, and we can get the foundation for that solid, then they can branch out and do more subtle stuff. But the fact that the literature has been filled with for decades been filled with the wrong questions or answers to the wrong questions, that is just, something's wrong with how we're teaching it.
But anyway. You will be surprised even after 2016 with the American Statistical Association put down things like that. On econometric journal, you still see big guy, including emails, using p-value and testing. So that is very embarrassing because you don't know how long it would take, And it's very hard to tell students don't use p-value when they see things like that.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's still not very well written.
It's like trying to steer an oil tanker. It takes a long time to change direction, but progress. So like the journals of the American Economic Association have banned stars. No more stars. P-values are okay, but stars are now out. That's, progress.
Well, the people, one time I talked to one of our thing here, the Chinese professor, Jing Hao, when I told him that, he said, that is academic freedom. He said academic freedom, you cannot ban p-value. He really think about banning p-value is like you violate academic freedom. I try to explain to him it's not about freedom, it's just about the right or wrong of something else. So it's up to you, it's up to you. But I think it's very, very difficult. When I try to explain to him, I said that estimation and prediction are based on mathematics, theorem. But testing is not based on theorem, it's based on logic, only on logic. So what is the logic underlying testing hypothesis? Matt and I, we argue that for a long time. The logic under hypothesis, even right now in Cornell, I just saw a paper, they say the following. We just modify the probability logic a little bit because the statisticians are willing to take this and take that. And they agree that the logic under hypothesis testing is not 0-1 value logic, it's a probability logic, it's a multi-value logic. And they know very well that under that multi-value logic, the model stolen is not valid. And the p-value is precisely, it's not proved by contradiction. In my sense, it's proved by intimidation. I say that there are three mathematical proof by induction, proof by contradiction, and proof by intimidation. And they use proof by intimidation to argue for p-value. But it's not easy to convince them.
No, it's not. Anyway, I think I've been preaching to the converted. Now we have to go out and convert the masses.
Yeah, I'm very Tony had a problem, but not me. I'm not teaching anymore. I retired. Okay, so I don't have to teach elementary statistics. But I don't know how Tony, how you teach.
Teaching the statistics.
You do testing or not?
Everything.
Are you testing?
No, I only mention the testing hypothesis chapter, but I will not teach that. Give them the problems there.
And Mark, Tony is at the same university, and next door to the guy who is the editor of the journal, psychology journal, that he was the first guy who banned p-value. Okay.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It's the same university.
David.
Yeah, David Trofimov, that you might like met him. His office is next to Tony.
That's just the method we just work together called a priority procedure, EPP procedure. To fix, you have the confidence level, you have the position, and then you get the sample size. You don't need to test it. You don't need the estimation. You know, and your error is that much under your control.
No, they are concerned about effect size. They are not concerned about something like either an effect or not. They want to know if it has one, what is the size of the effect. Yeah.
Exactly, but that's what we should usually be doing in economics too.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a question or maybe a statement by Briggs in the chat.
It's Matt.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm not gonna torture us anymore. You can read it or not. That's good enough.
I read it.
Probability does not exist. When you're teaching an estimate, you're teaching something that exists and you're trying to get it accurate. So I'm with Steve and Eddie that probability doesn't exist, and therefore we should teach just probability as a measure of logic or a measure of evidence, and therefore all of the old ways would be changed.
And you evoke Bertrand Russell's statement that probability is very important in science, but nobody have a slightest idea what it means. Yeah, that's what Bertrand Russell said. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, I think that Pradeep could use to take because Mark have to chair the section in the afternoon very soon.
Okay, so thank you very much to everybody. Thank again for the speaker first.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for all the speakers. And so now we have a lunch break in Vietnam, and we will get back.
I'll be back on tomorrow.
At 1:30 p.m. Vietnam time. In 1 hour and 23 minutes.
Is it 1 hour and 20? Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. See you all then.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
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 Recording stopped.